Time to enjoy a little relaxing swim. There's nothing to be afraid of. Let's find out if anyone played Subnautica. Everyone welcome, I am Old Bit and this is Did Anyone Play, a series where we investigate, analyze, and determine the truth about how much gamers have truly played and completed games. How do we do this? We use trophy and achievement milestones within games and then compare those results to our huge gaming database to evaluate and rank games compared to the rest of the industry. Using objective data and statistical comparisons, we can draw conclusions. We aren't reviewing the game in a traditional sense. Our goal is to provide analysis that can be better used to understand player behavior while ignoring game sales and hype to ensure we see reality as it truly is. Please drop a like or a sub to the channel if you want more of these types of videos. We're just starting out, so anything you can do is very much appreciated. And a quick spoiler warning as we may be talking about some elements of late game progression. So let's find out if anyone actually played Subnautica on Xbox, PS4, PS5, and Steam. Remember that all percentages we'll be talking about here come from the total number of players that have actually launched and or played the game, not bought the game. So these results are a full reflection on how gamers played Subnautica. The first milestone that players will likely reach is called getting your feet wet. This milestone is achieved once a player finishes the intro cutscene, gains control of their character for the first time, and either exits one of the two hatches in the survival pod or touches water for the first time. There's no way to avoid this, so how many players made it to this very first early milestone for Subnautica? On Steam, 87% touched water. Xbox saw 64.9% of players do this, PS4 had 90.1% reach this, and PS5 had 84.3%. Some of the results here are a bit alarming, especially since very little must be done by the player. Here's a quick look in graph form with the database average for Milestone 1. You can see that PS4 is leading all platforms. Steam is just below PS4 and PS5 is just below Steam, but all three are above the industry average by a decent amount. Xbox is below average, and essentially 35% of players on that platform never got out of the survival pod and essentially didn't play the game even though they booted it up. But frankly, for all platforms, you would expect higher, as this seems to be a trivial first milestone to hit, and yet even our best platform, PS4, lost 10% of players before this mark. There might be some serious trouble with how Subnautica starts out to have gamers disengage at that high of a rate so quickly. We'll see how this all pans out. So what is Subnautica? It's a single-player survival action-adventure game that puts the player in the role of a sole survivor of a spaceship that crash lands on an alien planet that is primarily oceans. The goal of the game is to survive, explore, uncover the secrets the planet holds, and ultimately find a way to escape the planet. One of the largest components of gameplay is overcoming the depths of the oceans and the terrifying creatures that inhabit it. The estimated average time to complete the game with some side activities is around 42 hours. It was developed and published by Unknown Worlds Entertainment, and Subnautica was released on Steam in January of 2018 and on PlayStation and Xbox in December of 2018. The second milestone all players would likely reach is called settling in for the long haul. This is awarded after a player builds their first base. Once a player can build a multi-purpose room and then build a hatch on a wall, the milestone will be reached. How many players made a home in Subnautica? Steam has 53.9% of players achieving this, Xbox is at 19.9%, PS4 is at 33%, and PS5 is at 37.5%. This is a terrible result for Subnautica. 80% of players on Xbox quit before they even made a simple base. Even PS4, that had the best start of all the platforms, only has 33% of players make it this far. Player retention from Milestone 1 to Milestone 2 is not good at all. Steam is the only platform that's still holding on a bit, with a little over half of the players making their first base. Hopefully this amount of player loss doesn't continue. It's always good to understand the competition a game was up against when it launched. What was happening around January 23rd, 2018 in the gaming world? Well, titles like Street Fighter V Arcade Edition, Celeste, and Dragon Ball FighterZ came out around this time on the platforms. Looking at Google Trends here, we see that Subnautica in blue was strong at the time of release, but Dragon Ball FighterZ was a solid match for hype. So it's clear that hype was solid for Subnautica and the competition was decent as well. We like to pick a mid-game marker for our third milestone. For Subnautica, we chose Extinction Event Avoided. To reach this milestone, a player must repair the Aurora reactor. Essentially, the ship you were on crashed near you, and the reactor needs to be repaired before it explodes. This is part of the story progression, so it has to be done to complete the game. How many players reach this milestone? Steam has kept 36.4% of players, Xbox has 11.1%, PS4 is at 19.1%, and PS5 has 25%. There is still significant player loss, and only Steam is above water compared to the industry average. While not as severe a drop as Milestone 2, the drop here still hurts. How did Subnautica do with critics? Metacritic for PC rates it at 87 out of 100, and Xbox received an 81 out of 100, and PlayStation got an 80 out of 100. On Steam, users have rated it overwhelmingly positive, both recent and all-time, with over 240,000 reviews. Subnautica was clearly critically acclaimed on PC and had strong showings on console. It also won Golden Joystick PC Game of the Year in 2018. It is safe to say the reception for Subnautica was strong. The most important milestone is our fourth one. This is for completing the main objective and what we will ultimately base our final ranking on. It definitely shows how many players finished the game and truly played Subnautica. This milestone is called Go Among the Stars, and is awarded when a player finally assembles the Neptune rocket, launches into space, and completes the game. Where does Subnautica end up on the different platforms? On Steam, 13.1% of players completed the game. For Xbox, it was 3.7%, PS4 had 7.2% finish, and PS5 had 10.8% complete the game. Let's pause here since we reached the end of the game. We want to check the percentage of players that quit each platform after making it through the first milestone but failing to reach game completion. Here our platforms are doing worse than the database average. We can see that Steam performed best and Xbox the worst, but all platforms struggled with player retention compared to the industry average. Finally, to get a feel for how completionists treated this game, the rare milestone 5 chosen for Subnautica is called Man's Best Friend. This milestone can be achieved if the player hatches and releases a cuttlefish. Once the cuttlefish is released, the milestone is reached. For Steam, we see that 11.5% of players actually accomplished this. On Xbox, it was 3.5% of players, PS4 had 7.8%, and PS5 had 10.2% that completed this milestone. Now let's see the full picture. Here are the raw milestones for our platforms for Subnautica, and with the industry averages for each milestone in gray for comparison purposes. Let's get into it. At milestone 1, Subnautica looks to be off to a good start, and while it is true that most platforms are above the average, the first milestone is so early in the game that any loss more than a few percent is actually a big warning sign. We see that play out in a big way when we look at the loss at milestone 2, as all platforms take a dive, and not into the depths of the ocean in this case. We see a bit of a flattening of the curves for milestone 3, but still a downward trend, and that even continues to milestone 4. Curious though is that PS4 for milestone 5 is better than milestone 4. That means that the players on PS4 actually accomplished a rare side objective in the game more than completing the game, but just by a tiny bit. So that's our final tally for our milestones, but now let's see how the game stacks up against all other games in our database and find out if anyone truly played Subnautica. We use milestone 4 as our ultimate ranking target. Here are the results for each platform for milestone 4 once again. It's time to reveal the final rank Subnautica has in our database. Here we go. Steam is a 3 out of 10, PS5 is a 2 out of 10, PS4 only a 1 out of 10, and Xbox is a 0 out of 10. It turns out not many gamers really played Subnautica. Steam was the platform of choice for the game, and a next-gen experience on PS5 didn't hurt, but really no one played Subnautica on PS4 or Xbox. So those are the industry rankings for Subnautica, but our database is able to give us other comparisons as well. Let's break it down. Here we can show the breakdown for Subnautica across class, genre, review score, and game length. Please keep in mind that because we are comparing data across smaller subsets, the statistical power of these rankings are far weaker than our overall industry ranking. Starting off with class comparison, Subnautica is an indie game. So ranking it compared to all the other indie game contemporaries, we see that the results are a little better. Steam is now a 4, PS5 is a 3, PS4 is a 2, but Xbox remains 0. How about genre? We have classified Subnautica as a survival action-adventure game. Compared to other similar genre games in the industry, we see that it ranks 10 on Steam, 9 on PS5, 6 on PS4, and 3 on Xbox. This is interesting, as compared to other survival games, Subnautica is actually among the most played games for Steam and PS5. PS4 and Xbox also improve, so among survival games, Subnautica holds its own. Next is ranking based on reviews. The scores for Subnautica put it in the category of games that have scored in the 80s for OpenCritic. The review rankings compared to other similarly reviewed games have Steam at a 2, PS5 at a 1, and both PS4 and Xbox at a 0. So for games with similar review numbers, Subnautica actually is struggling quite a bit. Lastly is ranking based on average game completion length. Subnautica is in the 25 to 50 hours range. Rankings compared to similar length games has Subnautica ranked on Steam as a 2, both PlayStation platforms at a 1, and Xbox at a 0. The game clearly struggles against games of similar length. So those are the rankings, but let's see if we can tease out some other observations by looking at these results in different ways. It's time for the deep dive. Let's start with progressive player loss. Each milestone shows how many total players have stopped playing the game at that particular point. PS4 jumps out early, but after the first milestone, Steam takes over the lead and never gives it up again. And once again, we see Xbox leading all player loss. Moving on, we can look at milestone player retention. This calculation only takes into account the player population loss as a percentage compared to the previous milestone. There are large player drops at all milestones. There is not one area that Subnautica showed strong in. You can also see that PS4 actually goes positive for milestone 4. That means that more players actually got the rarest side milestone than actually finished the game on that platform. How about completionists? How did the rarest milestone shake out on the different platforms? Steam's result is the best at almost 35%. But both PlayStation platforms showed very strong at 30% for PS5 and nearly 24% for PS4. Xbox finished up last around 10%. Finally, we check on early versus late game retention. When you read a chart like this, the best performers are further away from the center of the circle. Early game Steam was dominant, but not super strong. Endgame loss, PS5 did the best, followed closely by Steam. Completionist loss was super strong, with PS4 outpacing all other platforms, and Xbox second and Steam coming in last. Let's take one final look at all the platforms and their milestone 4 results, but this time we'll show you the full percent rank within our database. This is to give you a detailed view on how the rankings played out. Use this data as you will. Let's wrap this up. So what are our major takeaways from all the data? Overall, Subnautica results were surprising to me because I have played this game and expected a lot of fans to have really played this game a lot based on how much hype and the love I perceived it to have. Unfortunately, the reality is that the rankings were not good. Steam was the strongest platform, so the PC crowd did gravitate to the game a bit more. However, it is still only ranked at a 3 on the best platform. Not many gamers really experience Subnautica in a real sense. And we see players dropping everywhere. It's hard to nail down a singular issue, and that's because there isn't one. There's a huge drop in players after the intro cutscene, then an even bigger drop before players even make their first building. These are such early game activities that it's a bit shocking to see how few gamers actually accomplished it. One thing we can take away that is positive and shouldn't be understated is that Subnautica was very strong against other survival games. Compared to the same genre of game, we see Subnautica do very well on Steam and PS5. So much so that based on genre, we can say that everyone played Subnautica on Steam and almost everyone on PS5. That's an excellent result for sure. And while it didn't do well compared to the industry as a whole, the reviews for the game have always been solid, and winning a Game of the Year award is no small feat as well. That may have contributed to more people getting this type of game than normal, and then they opt out quickly when they realize it isn't their style of game. One other aspect is how effectively creepy Subnautica's oceans and wildlife are. It's possible that the game's setting and ambiance was enough to unsettle some gamers who noped out early. There's also a chance that some players just use creative mode, as that would have prevented any milestones. But I believe that is a very low percentage and isn't a consideration for main factors that are impacting the data we see. Subnautica is a pretty unique game. It demands a lot of exploration and doesn't hold the player's hand much throughout. It's a very well done survival game, but struggles to keep players engaged who aren't all in on the concept. It's a gem, and the developers really did a lot to create an engrossing environment to explore and survive in. It's a bit sad that so few gamers have ever really experienced a large portion of what Subnautica has to offer. If anything, improvements in the early game experience look to be in order. You can't lose 80% of people on a platform before you even build your most basic first base and feel good about it. If the early game retention was improved, I believe the later game holds pretty decent for Subnautica. There are lessons to be learned here. And that's a wrap. Hopefully you found all this data interesting and we all learned a little bit more about our gaming world today, and Subnautica in particular. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to do all the YouTube support stuff. Give us a like or a sub if you haven't already. I'd love to read any comments you have down below. What conclusions did you all take from this data? And of course, feel free to suggest the next game we should look at to determine if anyone played it. Until then, take care of yourself and each other.